Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Grüezi miteinander. My name is Daniel Kurjakovic. I'm the curator of programs here at Kunstmuseum Basel, and I have the privilege to welcome you all to tonight's talk with the artist KaraWalker and curator Anita Haldemann. I would like to especially also welcome the online spectators. We are very happy that you're joining us for tonight's evening. We are delighted to welcome you all here at Kunstmuseum Basel in the Neubau to an evening with an artist whose work resonates with some of the most pressing issues of today. New York-based artist KaraWalker needs little introduction, as her work has transcended the boundaries of the specialized field of art. With a very noted, celebrated, and sometimes controversial career, now spanning 3 decades, Walker's work and the world we live in are entangled in many ways on such provocative issues as race, gender, identity, or sexuality. Walker has always, it seems, tackled these issues with boldness and bravery. And we're thankful that we'll get the chance tonight to hear what lies beyond some of the more spectacular facets of her work, what lies beyond what we might believe we know about Kara's work and thinking. KaraWalker's work is nothing short of protean. She's a painter, printmaker, an installation artist, a filmmaker, and a professor most known to audiences worldwide for her sprawling tableau of black cut paper silhouettes, as well as for her large-scale public projects, such as the colossal installation presented in Brooklyn in 2014 of a sugar-covered Sphinx-like sculpture entitled A Subtlety. Another large-scale commission that has captured the imagination of audiences is the 2019 commission at Tate Modern's Turbine Hall entitled Fons Americanus, a monumental fountain sculpture referencing the Atlantic slave trade as it plays out in the histories of Africa, America, and Europe. But let us now turn to tonight's immediate cause of congregation and conversation, KaraWalker's first extensive solo exhibition in Switzerland, here at Kunstmuseum Basel, unsurprisingly ambivalently entitled A Black Hole is Everything a Star Longs to Be. What audiences will discover is a tremendous quantity and variety of drawings, more than 600 in fact, which have lain dormant for a rather long time and only recently started to see the light of day. In close collaboration with the artist, my colleague Anita Haldemann, head curator at Kupferstich Kabinett, and her team have expertly curated this treasure grove of drawings and are therefore giving us now an exhibition consisting both of some of the artist's personal archive as well as some brand new works. We here at Kunstmuseum Basel try to deal with the complex task of broadening the canon and the narrative about art, and therefore we're thrilled to engage with another voice of the Black experience after Sam Gilliam and Theaster Gates by adding a succinctly feminist perspective this time. Let me also briefly announce a new co-production between Kunstmuseum and Theater Basel, which is intensely inspired by KaraWalker's work. Entitled Telling Bodies, it is a specially conceived dance work which will allow audiences to experience the very physical language of bodies and gestures that is so vividly present in KaraWalker's work and representational realm. This new dance piece by ballet director Richard Worlock and his ensemble of Theater Basel will premiere next Friday on June 11th. Before passing on the microphone, some practical remarks that should help us to more thoroughly enjoy tonight's conversation between KaraWalker and Anita Haldemann. For guests present tonight here at Kunstmuseum Basel, we ask you to please only take pictures, if at all, in the first minutes, and then graciously put your phone on silent during the talk. Please note that while catalogs as well as a new limited edition are available upstairs, the artists will not be signing any catalogs tonight. For those of you wishing to let your thoughts linger on, I'm happy to announce also that our beautiful courtyard in the adjacent main building, including its bistro, will be open afterwards. But enough said, we don't want to keep you any longer. Thank you again to KaraWalker for the exhibition and for being here. Thank you to everybody here in the room and online for sharing this moment with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, for this introduction. Welcome from my side here at the Kunstmuseum Basel, the new building. And I'm glad to have KaraWalker here. It has been quite an intense time since you arrived here, not even 2 weeks ago. So thanks for having the energy to be here for this appearance. So how are you?
I don't know if I have the energy just yet, but I'm trying to bring it forward. I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Pretty good. I'm so
managing
happy.
day two of the opening.
Yes. No, it's been great, and we're actually so grateful that this exhibition is even possible now, because a year ago when we wanted to first open it, install it, COVID came along, stopped everything, made it complicated, and we had to postpone for a whole year. But I think right now is a very good time to open this exhibition.
Yeah, I'm glad that it worked out, because I think it was such a kind of ambitious, ambitious undertaking is kind of like my middle name at this point, but 600-ish, we're not sure. What's the actual number of drawings? Because it keeps migrating from 700 to,
Yeah, I think 600 is
600 drawings, and they're all a little bit orphans in the studio, so they became a little bit more orphaned over the year that we weren't sure if the exhibition was going to happen, and I'm glad that they have a little bit of a home. They're their first foster home for a few months.
Exactly. Yes, when we started to talk about this exhibition in 2017, I believe it was, we were talking about drawings, but little did I know that Kara would open up her archive for us, a decision which was taken much later. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about why you started opening your boxes and how you took the courage to lay this all out to the public.
Well, I guess a couple of things happened at once. I mean, after we met and before the show had any kind of concept, there was a moment, I think, when you invited me to the, I can't say it in German, but the
Kupferstichkabinett.
Kupferstichkabinett, and we looked at some old master drawings, and it's always very wonderful to have the privilege to go inside and sort of, it's sort of, entering into the canon of Western art in a way, but also there's a quality of these old materials that I really love. And so I thought, well, I'll do a drawing show and I'll make some drawings. But around that same time, I was moving stuff from my studio to a storage space, and I had boxes from kind of the whole history of my life, like sketchbooks from when I was a child, and then drawings from 1997 and drawings, and it was just like this kind of unexplored sort of terrain of things that I had put aside. And I started wondering about them. First, not in the context of doing a show, but just wondering why I had kept them in the first place. Because, there's always this thing that people tell you as an artist that you should, keep some of your work behind because of some kind of like monetary value or some kind of, thing that will happen in the future when you're broke and you can have your own work to auction off. And I think, I'm not sure if that's the reason they tell you that, but these weren't the works for that. This was just work that had either been kept aside because it didn't feel like it fit with an exhibition, or they were pieces that I made at very difficult periods of my life, or pieces that were sort of outtakes from larger groups, or something that, like sort of abandoned projects in a way, and I felt like maybe there was something worth exploring there, partly just as an understanding of my own psyche and, the things that you hold on to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a very mixed group of material. Some drawings, we wonder why they weren't in an exhibition before, and others seem so personal. There's notes, there's even writings that you kept for a reason.
Yeah, there's dreams.
Dreams,
which
yeah.
seems very personal and intimate. And yeah, I guess, for instance, I don't know if I should refer to pieces that are on the slides that are in the exhibition, but there was a period of time, I want to say maybe 2008, it was kind of a random year. There was a sort of economic decline, and there was these revelations coming out in the US talking about torture and talking about Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo Bay and all these things that had sort of been the recent outgrowth of the incursions in Iraq and a lot of other things globally happening, and then things happening personally, and I found myself at this weird impasse where I couldn't make a picture. And I also had just had a major retrospective the year before. I think that's a part of it. So there was this feeling of sort of having been gutted and thinking about that physical process and the pain that other people experience, and this other kind of, more glorified privileged pain of like revealing and showing and exhibiting, and but I couldn't make a picture, and I feel like one of my ongoing battles that gets resolved sort of in drawing is the battle between working figuratively, making pictures that are legible or readable to some extent, or maybe narrative, and not doing that, and not satisfying a viewer, not satisfying this kind of picturesque, desire. And so writing really came in. I mean, I always had a writing component, but I really just started doing these posters with automatic writing. And I think at the time, and this is 2008, just very specifically, at the time I thought, well, later on I'll make a visual component. At some magical future point, I'll complete this piece with these maybe somewhat abstract images. And I kind of never got around to it, but I always had the paper, so I'd always kind of come back and say, oh, this is that paper that I was going to make this other component. And so there's this group of drawings suddenly that are, that go from 2008 to 2012, that I do like a handful of drawings, and then they're like, no, it's not quite it, that's not quite it, that's not quite it. And then they're here as a kind of a reminder of the remainder or something.
Mm-hmm. So how do you look at these drawings now that they're framed on the wall? That's always a big difference from when you have it on your table or in your box.
Yeah, it really, I had an interesting moment last night, because I really have only lived with the work for a short period of time. I exhibited a few pieces in the gallery right before lockdown happened last year, and then they've just been basically floating, or in a crate. And so there was the unpacking process, and everything became active again, thinking about where they live in space and how they move or don't move an idea along. And then last night, I sat around for a few minutes with some of the work, and I did have that feeling, oh, they're legitimate. You know, it was really like a kind of a claiming of again, like the orphan idea, I guess, kind of popped up, or the sort of illegitimate child idea. It's like, oh, you know, I own, you know, you are mine, even though I'm sort of giving you up to this institution. Like, I understand you now. Like, I understand, like, what part of me you come from in some ways. And I think that was really, you know, I think that was the vital thing that maybe I was looking for at the beginning of this process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course that makes us not only grateful, but also in a way proud. And it also touches me that you think, you know, you feel this is a place, a museum where there's space for this kind of work and where you want people to see it and confront it. And
yeah, I mean, I think the confrontation part is complicated because I think on the one hand there's, you know, there's the dialogue with drawing, you know, it's like that there's a space for an understanding, because I guess previous exhibitions that you've done here, that there's an understanding for what that activity means or where it fits in the Western canon of painting and image making. But yeah, I think maybe emotionally, psychologically, and politically, I'm not sure exactly. Like that's a little bit more of the question mark.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always feel that drawings, more than other media, it's kind of a fragile thing. It's not only that the paper's fragile, but it's more open, or in a way, drawing tends to be more honest, because you, of course, can erase, but usually you still see something was erased. So it's what's on the paper is there. Everyone can see what you did, and if you were angry or not, or if you make it look angry or you make it,
yeah. It's a very revealing kind of vulnerable process, and I think I gravitated to it pretty early on in my art. Well, in graduate school, really, but I gravitated to drawing partly as a way to escape the kind of chains of Western painting. I mean, honestly, even though I'm talking about the Western canon and all these things, I think that some of the ideas that I kind of approached my art with had to do with, you know, how do I even phrase it these days? Like, do I want to sit at this table or not? And even if I do want to sit at this table, am I even allowed to sit at this table? And, you know, am I going to claim it? And in what sorts of ways am I going to kind of, you know, explore, like, you know, this whole history of Western art, this like somewhat more brief history of African American art specifically, and I was interested in that canon specifically because. I mean, in the idea or in the exploration of identity, you know, I was born in 1969, and then there was Roots was the sort of seminal kind of cultural moment in America, and probably in a lot of the world, when the miniseries Roots came out, and after Alex Haley's book, this idea of really getting back to Africa and understanding, like, this place that, you know, the African diaspora kind of originated from, and was sort of the result of this sort of, you know, colonialist seeding of the Americas, you know, really took hold. And so this idea in the Black arts movement sort of in the 60s also kind of helped sort of, you know, repatriate, I guess, the idea of an African American artist having a particular root in Africa. But I really wanted to kind of, because I grew up in California, which is, I don't know if you know, this is kind of like the end of history. Like when you go to California, it's like the western edge, it's the last frontier somehow, and so maybe Alaska's the last frontier, but so you kind of grow up without a sense of history in that way. You just are there, and going to Georgia as a teenager gave me a sense of a worrying sense of history, right? That we had family there. There was my family origin is kind of, as far as I know, Georgia, and then it drops off, and there is no beginning. You know, it goes into the Atlantic, it goes maybe to the Caribbean, and to some part along the west, the western edge of Africa. And so I thought, maybe I'm American. So I really wanted to explore America, American history, African Americanness, and the idea of a point of origin, like a single point of origin. I don't know, I'm sort of off on a tangent right now. I forgot what the question was. But as far as like making drawings, I think that that also becomes a kind of point of origin for making paintings or other sorts of, grand, proper forms of art. And there's something really, I don't know, important and poignant for me to sort of get to square one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you once said the sentence that drawings transforms a blank page into a site of reflection. Mm. And you also talked about like colonizing this space, or this white space of a white sheet of paper.
Well, yeah, the paper and the drawing tool and the artist. I really started, I guess, in that moment of sort of thinking about my problems with painting. I also was thinking about, I think it maybe kind of comes out of like literary criticism or something, like, but I was thinking, okay, there's an author and an audience and a character, and there's the written word on the page, for instance, and the interaction between these three is like, it's a point of departure for me. And then thinking about my relationship being the artist, and somehow the artist is, the holder of this kind of manifest destiny kind of colonialist kind of attitude. Like, now I own you, canvas. Your space is mine to do whatever I want with. And I think maybe this comes distinctly out of a kind of an American point of view, and perhaps a patriarchal point of view. And I really wanted to understand that, and I also wanted to understand in what ways the painting or the paper or the substrate might come after me, might resist my attempts to ensnare it in my own sort of grand design. And that tension is both absurd and just fraught. And I think that's what I wind up approaching. And this is, I guess, how the cutout happened in the end, was just that it became a kind of a game of trying to still maintain some kind of control over having a voice and saying my piece and making a narrative, and the kind of almost improvisational resistance to doing what is expected or necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think early on you described the cutouts and the drawings as a weak medium, and that was the
the feminine
yes,
gesture.
Exactly, feminine, and also not taken as seriously as big painting and sculptures.
Right.
So, but that was also a kind of a way into.
Well, it was a way in. I don't know if it's viewed the same or if it was just coming out of art school, but it was, it was clear that in the late 80s, like, there was big painting, and a lot of money going on. And I wasn't thinking about the market end of it, but just like big painting seemed to be what one would do. And so I in undergrad in Atlanta, I was making paintings that were too big for, doors, like average doors, or my car to get them home, big enough, like, 9-10 foot in one direction, and so I think there was a 12-footer in there. That was a good one. They're all gone and lost now and destroyed, but I do remember tying one to the roof of my car to drive it home for 18 miles, and that was, well, anyway. So I was an ambitious young lady, but I did think about at some point I did really have to take stock, not so much on the size, but really like the why is it I'm trying to occupy that particular space, and what is the sort of resistance that's happening, both culturally and socially from my peers and also from within, and historically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this status of drawing, or drawing being something, especially how you practice it, it's very sketchy, it's quickly done. Mm-hmm. Even the big Obama portraits, mm-hmm. they kind of imitate paintings, but when you look at them, you see the lines, you see they're unfinished, they're, so.
They're finished.
Okay.
Sorry. There's a kind of a, maybe not quite manic, but like a kind of like let me just get this down quick. I think especially with the scrolls, I think there was a moment when I started making drawings on scrolls that they were like preparatory sketches for grand wall work. Like if I'm going to work this way across the wall in this sort of narrative format, then I should work this way across the paper. And then something else entirely different happened when I continued working that way, which, the pieces that are here, they're very cartoony and they're quick, and I roll them up as I go along, and then there are these kind of like little clusters of thought, and sometimes some things relate back to something that happened earlier in the scroll, but I never really see what happened earlier in the scroll. And so it is this kind of stream of consciousness practice that, sometimes things are a little bit more complete, but and other times they're, it's across the board. Again, sometimes it's just words that come out, and other times it's like, and I think there's one drawing in here that's so light and pencil, and I kept it, and it was in the archive, and there's that question, like, does this count? And I think that's the larger question in a way for me, especially with some of the pieces in the tables, is like what counts, as far as is it not archival material, but image archive material, things that I've kept around that I thought would be useful, inspiration, and then words and notes and things that have just been floating around for so long. Like, does it count? And I think this is a way of sort of making it count, so that perhaps, me of the past can move forward.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not answering your questions. I know I'm just
you're doing
riffing,
fine.
just sketching here.
But I think that's the advantage of drawings as well. I always imagine, the painter in front of the canvas, he has to do this one big painting that counts forever, that's, masterpiece. Yeah. But for the drawings, you do 10 or 20 or 30, some are better, some are less, but it's always a quest, a process, something you're trying to figure out.
Yeah. I think I had a painting and drawing instructor also who made us do 100 drawings. Like you sit down and you do 100 drawings in like one session, not over the course of days. And that was always something I kind of carried with me. And, there are groups of drawings in here. They're not a full 100, but they're definitely like in that spirit of like sitting down and just kind of having this thought process session and using as few materials as possible, because I don't want to get it sort of muddied up with beauty or technique or anything. It's really just like, okay, what am I thinking about? Where am I today? Where's my head at? Or where am I physically? There's some drawings in there, I think, that were made either while I was in Germany or just after a trip to Germany that have clippings from newspapers and, little bits of sort of reflections on that time. But it's not exclusively locked into, being a travel log. It's really, the sort of internal scape of, and one drawing might just be about how the brush moves, and another one might be about you know, what braided hair feels like when it's weighing you down, and, you know, so there's just this kind of different, and one drawing might be about both things at once, but it's only apparent to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that fascinated me when I saw this selection for the first time, that it's, in terms of drawing techniques and material, it's so diverse. I mean, you try out a lot of things, like drawing on black paper, you take it's white color and just make blots and then even invent figures out of it, and sometimes it's pencil, it's a lot of different things.
I mean, I think, you know, just to kind of I mean, there's a lot of play, right? And I think that the playing around is especially kind of important for me. I think in regards to the sort of, how do I want to say this? Like, there's a kind of, and you know, no shade to anyone who thinks nice things about me, but there's like a lot of importance that gets sort of placed, and not just, and I think, you know, I'm trying to do something in my work, and I don't think it's unimportant, but I do think that as a younger artist, really kind of fighting against the implication that if I did art, it was going to have to matter in a particular way, particularly to a black audience, and not only in a particular way to a black audience, but in a particular way to a white audience that would confirm or reify their idea of what it means to have a black experience. And I felt that I was not capable of satisfying the demand in the way that it was requested. And part of that experience or that understanding comes from living in the South, where not that the South is all that radically different than the rest of the United States of America, but it has a kind of, it has a certain something that I recognize as being quite particular, and it's at the time in the 80s, 90s, the racial makeup of Atlanta. I mean, I think that Atlanta's maybe more majority African American at this point, and other groups, but it was very much a black and white kind of place with a white power structure then, and a kind of a secondary black power structure, and a lot of tension and a lot of striving and a lot of conversations around that kind of like everything was okay as long as everybody had some money, or like middle class, you know, or getting there. And that Atlanta's motto when we moved there, or before we moved there, was the city too busy to hate. And one of Atlanta's claims to fame during the civil rights movement was, instead of facing the ugly scenes of, you know, the Birmingham, you know, the boycotts and the riots and the police dogs, they just said, well, why don't we just not so quietly desegregate our big shopping stores so that the black population will be allowed to go and spend their cash at Riches or whatever. I don't know if I'm like throwing Riches under the bus. I don't think Riches is still around anymore. But, and the effect of that was actually to sort of undermine the black businesses that were thriving in, you know, some of the neighborhoods there. But that was Atlanta's kind of like move, was capitalistic. Anyway, I'm really on a like tangent central, but I think I wanted to sort of bring that back into the conversation, because I think like making drawings and being playful and being irreverent and being excessive and being too much, or being, you know, sort of loud, or being all the things that kind of got ascribed to the work and that are present in the work, or, you know, are things that weren't really allowed, you know. And I think, you know, there's a certain respectability complex that happens, you know, when you enter into the kind of middle class space of like being a black person in the you know, in America or in the world, where you have to really make sure that you're put together and not too outrageous and not making too many waves or not upsetting people because you don't want to be on the outskirts, because the outskirts is really bad.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's something really, you know, liberating, I guess, to be able to just like make drawings and make the drawings that I make, and to really feel free in that space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what it seems, that the paper offers so many possibilities and this sort of certain freedom
Mm-hmm.
to do whatever
Yeah.
you want. But you also related drawing, or the character of drawing being a process, an ongoing process, that it could be related to a question of identity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've been exploring your own identity, but also what is expected of you as a Black woman artist. How do we see that related today?
Today? Yeah.
Or has it changed?
Well, I mean, I think with drawing, it's, you know, there's still there's the introspective space, you know, that it's not the wall here that has to be confronted, but just, you know, the table, and there's something very focused. And, you know, I think especially in this past year, and over the last few years, really, with the conversations that have been going on in and around art and who can make what kind of art and when and why. I mean, I guess drawing is still the space where, you know, the problematic can be explored. It's not that easy always, I think, to, especially when current events like conspire to, you know, I don't know, the current events don't conspire to do anything, they just happen, but there's a feeling as an artist that I, you know, should be responding like nonstop or somehow. And I know artists who do, you know, make a work, you know, about the insurrection, you know, that happened on January 6th, and about George Floyd's murder, and about, you know, the trial, and, you know, who kind of like can sort of get there like quickly and do that. And and I'm glad that they're doing that, because I actually want to be able to, you know, I've made work that sort of like is in response to, you know, like the paranoia of being, you know, in America with, you know, the many hundred thousands of deaths happening, you know, because of COVID and because of, you know, an unequal healthcare access and things like that. But I think that I've created a space for myself in my work, my practice, to be able to, you know, do that, and also, you know, to be myself, and, you know, myself who doesn't know exactly what to think, or doesn't know exactly how I feel about, and it's not that I feel anything completely wrong or different than anybody else, but it's just like my feeling is, you know, related to my feeling, and it's related to being Kara over these years that I've been Kara. And so how do I see it? You know, how does it come out of me? Not, you know, what do you want to see coming out of me? And but yeah, I think that having a drawing practice, and it definitely, there have been some moments. I made a couple of pieces this past year that are just like god awful, and I'm just in there. You know, this is the archive for the future, where I don't know where they fit, because some part of me was, I couldn't access, like emotionally, psychologically, I couldn't access all of the things that were happening at once. So I have these kind of strange, almost disembodied drawing sculpture things that I was just like, I don't know, later. You know, later. We'll let you ferment and pull you out in a few years and see if there's something there.
Well, it has been an exceptional year for everyone, but you being in New York, it was very different than for our Swiss audience or for myself. You were really in the middle of a really big tragedy in New York with all the COVID deaths. We also lost one of the authors of the catalog, Maurice Berger, who died. So you don't know yet how this, the effect on your work, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think with a few pieces I know specifically, it's really funny. I do feel like those are the moments when I feel very proud or something, or I don't know, like privileged or whatever, to be able to know how to draw, just because I wouldn't have known what else to do. Yeah, and I think that, losing Maurice very early on really brought it home, because it was really at the beginning stages of us even having a lockdown that suddenly I knew somebody who died. And then there were, sort of escalating, tragedies of different size and shape, within the family, and then after George Floyd's murder and the protests were happening, and while the protests were happening, there was the protest, and then there was, this looting and sort of rioting that happened in New York that was kind of off to the side, but then that increased the police presence, so that every time there was a protest, there was this increased police presence with helicopters, and the helicopters would literally be like 5 or 6 over our house, like all night, and then it was just like this kind of constant onslaught. So just when you thought that you could find like a plateau where you could maybe like turn on the news, and then we had the last president who's in office, so that was also always escalating some sense of tension and anxiety. And so, when you're under siege, I think it's very hard to think creatively, and I always sort of prided myself in being able to find like a creative solution to things, but I was sort of also feeling like, I just have to make sure that we have, food and toilet paper and, whatever. And then eventually I kind of got a studio situation sorted out so that I did in fact find moments when the feeling that I was doing something, even though it was this big, happened. And so there are a few drawings that I made that when I look at them, I remember, I mean, I don't know if this doesn't tell you anything about the show, but there's a couple of drawings that are so tight, and I was like, I do know how to draw, I guess, and they came at moments when I was at the peak of my stress level. And I thought, wow, that's really, I don't really want to have to arrive to that point always to make a drawing, but
yeah, it seems you picked up the theme of medicine, of course, in the context of COVID, and that also plays a role in some drawings here. This 38-part suite of drawings that we bought for our collection called The Gross Clinician, Path to Gravidam.
Yeah.
And there also one of the triggers was the visit to our Kupferstich cabinet and looking at the old master drawings, which inspired you to explore old master techniques. But on the other hand, there was also this theme of the medical exploitation of black bodies.
Yeah. There was I don't know if that was I here the year before. Or did I go to the pharmacy museum also, and the anatomical museum I'd been to, and so that the combination of really. There's something about really getting the heebie-jeebies when you go into a space like that and thinking like, oh, okay, this was the skull of this is a body. But yeah, there was a story about Grandison Harris, who was a slave in Augusta, Georgia, and he was kind of owned by the Medical College of Augusta, collectively owned, all the doctors, and so he became their grave robber, so they could perform whatever their medical experiments and autopsies and study the body. And I guess the story about him that's interesting to me also is that he was quite good at it, and he kind of had a little bit of inspired fear in the black community. He was also robbing the graves of black people. And after the Civil War, there was a period called Reconstruction, and there was an effort to, sort of put black former slaves into different positions in government and what have you. And he became a judge very briefly, but the Reconstruction era is a whole nother conversation. So this didn't last very long. And I think he wound up doing a similar work after that period, again, working in the medical college. The reason this story even came about is because I think a few years ago, they were doing a renovation of the medical college, and they found the remains of, hundreds and hundreds of bodies in the basement of the building.
Mm-hmm.
So with that and these kind of conversations about, the sort of ongoing sort of presence in the social media and on these other platforms that we have of, the annihilation of black people at the hands of law enforcement and other systems of control, it really kind of makes you wonder, I guess, makes you a bit paranoid and a bit angry that there's no peace in life or in death. And so I guess these sort of existential questions are kind of like the reoccurring theme and maybe the reoccurring reason for my making drawings. It's also about the question of my own existence and the question of this collective idea of black existence and what it means, where it comes from, who determines what it means, and if I can get some kind of grasp on it,
Mm-hmm.
Doing my own sort of autopsy on it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But then there's I guess the other part of that title is the sort of the father who gives birth, and I guess I was also thinking about patriarchy and fatherhood and my relationship to my own father and the kind of complicated dance between reverence and
Mm-hmm.
Iconoclasm or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, these drawings look really spontaneous and like sketchy again, but at the same time, there are all these references. Like there's the Gross Clinician goes back to the Gross Clinic by Thomas Eakins, which goes back to Rembrandt,
Right.
or then the Obama portrait showing him as Saint Anthony goes back to Michelangelo and Schongauer, and the Isenheimer altar, which you visited in Colmar.
Yeah, I guess the Obama drawings, I really, when I was thinking, I'm doing a drawing show, so I'll make drawings with like proper materials. So there's also one that's called a drawing exercise, and I was just like, let me pull out all the stops with the old-fashioned drawing materials, just because why not? And the Obama portraits, I was sort of riffing on this idea, slightly riffing on Kehinde Wiley's official portrait of Obama, which was in the news. And I thought, what would have happened? I'm not a portraitist, first of all, but what would have happened, right, if I had been asked to do a portrait? And I thought of all the different reasons why they would never have asked me to do a portrait. But I thought, well, because I think about, these sort of allegorical, the fact of the human man, Barack Obama, and then the president, Barack Obama, and then the sort of mythology, the mythological space that he was, elected to occupy, which was the first black president of the United States of America, which is a whole nother sort of idea that's outside of him, that's sort of formed by the public and in the public imagination in all these different ways over many, many decades in different media. So I thought I would do a series of portraits of Obama and see what would happen as a sort of icon of hope, or as a kind of, the stereotypes that were, the sort of grotesque stereotypes that were being propagated by racists that all sort of came up out of the shadows, if they had been the shadows, and were like very prominent, not just on social media, but in the news, because social media and the news became one. So, it was impossible to sort of separate the sort of grotesque from the news. So yeah, there he is, or there it is, the Barack Obama, not the actual man. And there was another drawing, which I guess, I don't know if it was worth mentioning, a drawing that's not in the show, but I wish were. But there was a group, a trio, and I don't have an image, but I'll maybe find a picture of it and post it on Instagram. It was a triptych that was really kind of a direct result of going to the Pharmacy Museum. And it's partly a riff on Augusta Savage's 1938 or 39 sculpture, Lift Every Voice, which was at the World's Fair in New York. And Augusta Savage, African-American sculptor, and it's kind of a harp with different, children singing, and it's, it's a very peculiar shape. So there's this shape, and then the central image is kind of this exploded body, all in white, also using like materials I don't usually use, like oil stick. And I was trying to invent a machine. I was very, very furious with the way that, racism's, America's white supremacy problem had just sort of metastasized into like this almost uncontrollable thing. And I thought, well, there's got to be a machine we can make that can convert white supremacist racism into some kind of nutrient that can feed, the people who are most in need of health. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to invent a machine, and I wish that piece were here. It's at the Broad in Los Angeles. Okay. So you can go there and look it up. It was for this show.
Yes. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about this. The biggest drawing in the exhibition, Felt the Fiend. You mentioned it before, a drawing exercise.
A drawing exercise, yeah.
It's like 2.5 and 6 meters.
I can talk about it without being, yeah. I did have an idea in there, but I lost it somewhere along the way in doing all of the fun drawing exercise bits. I was thinking about a kind of procession with the sort of Don Quixote, Joan of Arc kind of woman artist marching to, take down the, powers that be, but with a kind of motley crew and, a broken down horse and all the tools that might be at her disposal. And then it did sort of become it was a struggle, that piece, I'll just say, even though I kind of like the way it looks, to make it resonate with what I had intended. But if you're into like doing fun drawing techniques and you want to just occupy a lot of space with your loud voice, put up a lot of paper and then get a big stick and then attach your drawing material to the stick and then stand back a couple of feet and do that for a while. Draw figures and it's make you feel like Monet.
Yeah, it's a great drawing that has come to be an awful battle scene. I mean, there's.
Yeah, it was a battle scene with death and destruction, and I guess a kind of a not quite crucifixion, but a sort of central figure with her back turned. But it's not that gruesome. I think that's my problem, why I'm hesitant to talk about it, is that it falls into the side of being pretty.
Yeah, it has a certain lightness and with the color and yeah, exactly.
Like the gray background and the yes. The art teacher in me is giving me a critique right now. Sorry, I'm having some thoughts. But I think that as far as it being a drawing exercise, it works better for me in concert with the other types of work that's here. You know, that there are these sort of visceral text pieces and other visceral drawings that kind of get to the heart of the matter, and then we can sort of pull away and just have a moment and just be sort of somewhat lyrical and think about battle scenes. We've seen, you know, we go to museums, there are, scenes of history that are quite gruesome, and they're only tolerable, I think, sometimes because they seem long ago and far away, with different clothes on or something. But I think not much has radically changed when it comes to, you know, violence and warfare and fear.
And it's felt as fiend, so you're often putting us on the wrong track or misleading us, and then it's there's more to it than the lightness and the colors. And
I think so.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Well,
what's next?
That's it. One last question.
All right.
When will you open up more boxes for a new
Oh my God, the more boxes question. Well, I already alluded actually to having a bunch of uncertain pieces from this past year. Not a lot, but a couple of things where I'm so mystified by, you know, the inability to finish it, or the inability to kind of like it's like standing on the stage and starting with a grand pronouncement and then and then walking away. And that's what I have in my studio. So it's kind of like aborted performances that are waiting for some kind of direction or some kind of necessity for their being there. So I don't know, give it another 25 years.
Okay. We'll talk again soon. Well, thank you very much, Kara. It's been wonderful. And
all right, thank you. Thank you for having me and for, letting this take good care of them.
We will protect them. And I just wanted to mention the catalog, which we've done with JRP Editions, with Clément Dirier and the wonderful designer Gilles Gravillet. So the book is really integral part of the project, and the shop is open, so when you go upstairs, feel free to buy a couple of things, and also the bistro is open. So thank you again, Kara, and I wish you all a wonderful evening. Enjoy the weekend. Bye.